Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Early Child Care and Education Quarterly System Update tonight on April 2024. We're glad you all could take time to join us this evening. Hopefully this is the pregame show to you later on watching the Pacer game and cheering on the Indiana Pacers as they take on game 2 in the series tonight. So thank you all for taking time on a Tuesday evening with us. The agenda for this evening, if you're not familiar, there's been many legislative updates coming out of session that will have impacts on the early child care sector in Indiana, and we're going to get an update on what those implications will be, and then when you can expect to see those changes and what those changes mean for you. We're also going to get an update on the child care management system efforts underway, and then we'll talk about what to expect in the next town hall. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the director of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning, Courtney Penn. It's a mouthful tonight, Courtney.
It is, and I'm glad it's not just me, Stephen. So I appreciate the solidarity there. So good evening, everyone. As Stephen said, my name is Courtney Penn. I'm the director of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning, a division of Family and Social Services Administration here with the state of Indiana. I'm looking forward to our time together. So we're going to talk, again, as Stephen mentioned, we're going to talk this evening about our early care and education updates that happened during legislative session. Going to go over some of them at a very high level and then also dig a little deeper into the weeds of the implications, the effect of the bill's language and how it's affecting our work moving forward and the work that's happening underneath all of those pieces. And so again, really honored to be in this space, in this seat, at this moment, in this time, in the state of Indiana, with so much out there for childcare being a very well seen and sought after priority. Our governor and all those across the world, across the country, who have really begun to take notice of the fact that just how important this work is, right? And the fact that we have strong representation in these bills, strong representation in the efforts by Governor Holcomb and the General Assembly is a great win to be in this early care and education space for over 24 years now. It really is honoring to see these great strides that we are seeing take place here in our state. And really want to focus this evening on the changes and how, but I hope as we settle into some of these changes and discuss them, we think about how this work is so critical to the priority of access and of increasing and strengthening access and affordability to high quality childcare and education for our families, for our communities, and also as we support the industry's workforce infrastructure and the economic development even of our state, of being able to be a contender to be able to support all workforce related components and supports that are needed for our families, communities, and childcare providers who are boots on the ground doing the work. So we'll start off this evening talking about the changes in Senate Enrolled Act 2. A lot of the pieces within this particular piece of legislation were based around many of the items that were written into the Governor Holcomb's next level agenda. You'll see here on the slides, again, I'm going to go very high level, and then we're going to take some of these pieces apart and some of them and further discussions and have slides that dig a little deeper into them. So I won't hit them quite as hard on this particular slide for most of them, but this is just a teaser, if you will, of the information that will be shared on the next few slides. So we'll talk through this. So expanding on my way pre-K and child development funding eligibility for child care provider employees. So really thinking about how this current new piece of legislation allows for staff and child care programming to be able to have a greater opportunity to be eligible for CCDF and on my way pre-K programming. And then next we will talk through reducing the caregiver age groups for licensed child care centers. The reason why we specifically called in the centerpiece is because both of those two changes really did effectively support licensed child care centers. We also, in this legislative session, had the ability to have a micro facility pilot program that was embedded in that language. And we don't have an additional slide about this one this evening, but I will inform you that there is more information to come, and the licensing team, myself, the legal team, others are working diligently along with a third-party vendor that is the micro facility guru, if you will, shared services guru, if you will, from a national standpoint, that is helping us navigate through what next steps for that pilot could, and should look like, as we are being tasked to have a proposal, if you will, prepared, a process in place by January of next year, and then a rollout of this process by March of next year. And so we know in 2 blinks it'll be 2025, so we don't take time for granted, even though those dates seem far off. We are moving to the drum, that knowing that those things are going to happen quickly. And so having planning sessions and brainstorming sessions are already taking place, and we plan to continue to engage current childcare providers and other key partners along the journey as we continue to drive the heart of what that was written in to support, which is, again, back to access, affordability, and ways to help streamline the work of providers to help with those pieces. So also, you see here, allowing qualified individuals such as K through 12 teachers to serve as substitute educators. We'll dig a little deeper into what that means, streamlining efforts for K through 12 schools. Again, an opportunity, again, for more access and accessibility for our children to have access to participate in On My Way Pre-K. Authorizes a statewide childcare and out-of-school time learning employee compensation study dashboard. So we will, again, there'll be things that I will share on here that are directly affected by myself in the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning. And there's also pieces that will effectively be led by Courtney Hott as our Early Learning Advisory Committee Director, and then also the chair of, as we effectively call ELAC, and also the ELAC chair, who will be driving some of these pieces, and then which includes some of the reporting, and this particular one on the compensation study is one of them, and then both OECOSL and ELAC have some different reporting requirements. So we'll go through some of these pieces in a little more in depth on the next few slides. And so before we dig into the meat of SE2, let's talk a little about House Enrolled Act 1102. And so here you can see on the slide what really was changed within that piece of legislation was the definition of a family childcare home was updated, and then also the allowances for contracted support staff in schools to be able to access childcare at that school. So again, we'll talk about that a little more. And really quickly, before we start going through the meat, if you will, of those particular pieces of legislation, I do want to call in and tease up a hot off the press piece that has been added to our OECOSL webpage on our FSSA website that is specifically for supporting the language and changes, I should say, that happened during legislative session. And so here on this particular landing page, there are FAQs from questions that we have already gotten from childcare providers through multiple opportunities, questions that we've received throughout our internal team that may have popped up and brewed up even through questions we even had that came through during legislative session, right? And so we kind of already started building out FAQs and started talking through like different resources. So you can go on that webpage and see where those FAQs are. We also plan to use the questions that we receive out of the chat from the webinar, the town hall that was earlier today, and the one this evening, and the one tomorrow with key stakeholders and strategic partners as well, to continue to add to those FAQs. And we will work with our training and technical assistance vendors, our local CCRNRs, and our other funded state partners to continue to help with the engagement along the way as we progress towards the completion of all putting these things from now into practice, to help along the way, that we are ensuring that communication and supports are in place, including resources, office hours, help desk hours, et cetera, that are at the ready to be supportive and helpful, leveraging the licensing team as the subject matter experts for those licensing facing regulatory changes, et cetera. So really, and paying close attention to our Monday must-knows and other messagings that will continue to come out as well as we continue to partner together and work together to be responsive to these legislative changes. So here on this slide is just a really nice overview of the key changes that are impacting providers. On the left, you will see the actual initiative, and then to the right, you will see the required date. So when we thinking about even just the eligibility of On My Way, expanding eligibility of On My Way, and also knowing that we are currently in open enrollment for On My Way. So we, again, will keep lines of communication open as we continue to get closer to that time frame to have something in place for childcare providers to be able to access that resource, childcare staff to be able to access that resource. And I will say that even historically, as for example, last year when the FPL was raised from 127 to 150, it technically went into effect July 1, but because we all knew and understood that it takes time to train staff, train folks who will be using the system, get the system ready for that new priority group that's going to now be eligible for a subsidy, it does take some time. And so typically we do know that it's effective July 1, but we do tend to give ourselves a little room in order to make sure those things are in place in a way that we get things in proper order the right way ahead of time versus after the fact. And so I just do want to call that in, that this is not the first time that something's been effective July 1. That means that is when you can begin the process of making this a possibility, but that doesn't necessarily mean that vouchers will be in the hands of employees on July 1. So I just want to make sure that that's super clear, just holistically. And so as we go through all these pieces, right, that lots of them takes processes and everything is not exactly on the money a July 1 thing, but we do our due diligence to get as close to that date as possible. Streamline options for K through 12 schools to participate in On My Way pre-K, the very same speech, right? Doing our due diligence to make sure that we keep the lines of communication open and work with our partners there at the Department of Education to support this as also. Increase the numbers of unrelated children allowed to be in unregulated homes. Again, all these things here on this list we'll talk about a little bit more, but the importance of this particular slide is, and I wanted to make sure that I specifically call this in, is that you will, if you've looked at the legislation language and know when things are required or say that they are due, especially these things up at the top that really refer to getting a system changed or getting a process in place. We work very hard to make sure that we hit that mark as much as possible. But again, there's so many different aspects to that. And again, we'll talk about a little bit of that later on in the slides. There's so many pieces that go into play there that we sometimes we go past that July 1 date because there's internal processes, training, system enhancements that take time to take place and to be done. And so I just want to make sure that that is clear to folks as we move forward into next steps for legislative session, follow-up pieces. Okay, so now we are for real going to dig in to some of these pieces. So expand eligibility for childcare assistance for employees of licensed childcare programs. So just as I mentioned on the previous slide, again, ultimately our goal is July to have this in place, but we do understand that that will have a lot to do with how quickly we can get processes in place, which includes ways to clearly understand that you as an employer, as a childcare program owner, operator, that you can verify to us that this person works there at your site. And then the other piece is too, it's not always just an automatic, because this 85% above state median income, and you see this example here on the slide, is a federal requirement. So the federal government, our funder, the Office of Child Care, will not allow us to pay above 85% of Indiana's SMI. And all that comes from taxes, tax information. There's many different things that get them to that equation that says, what is each state's respective median? And so based on our state's median income. And so I do want to be very clear that this is an offering where we are, for the most part, really making childcare staffing, childcare staff a priority group, if you will, but there's still processes that we have to follow, just like anyone else who's eligible, who's possibly eligible for CCDF, that there will still be processes in which we still have to collect the proper documentation and needed information in order to determine eligibility. So I will say this is, to not be discouraged, this is a great win, because this even takes us above the current FPL of 150 that's currently in play for most. So, but I do want to be very transparent and very clear with the fact that this is not necessarily an automatic thing. It still has to go back. We still have to lean into our CCDF requirements when we're talking about the expenditure of CCDF funds. All right, streamline options for K through 12 schools to participate in On My Way Pre-K. So again, as I mentioned earlier, the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning, FSSA, will be working with the Department of Education as we navigate through this, and it's particularly Dr. Savisi in the Office of Kindergarten Readiness, as we are navigating through the next steps through this process of how this can be implemented in a way that schools feel supported and have the support that they need and the information that they need. And so you will see some responses to these things also in the FAQs that I called in earlier. So as you can see here on the screen, the change overview here really is that it really truly extends the provider eligibility to public schools, including charter schools, accredited non-public schools, regardless of their PTQ level, to be able to access On My Way Pre-K and those pre-kindergarten vouchers. Currently, we have not made that, we've made concessions for accredited non-public schools based on their accreditation. And we've scored those, reviewed those, just like we would with any other provider who's working to be accredited, who's accredited, right? But so we still put them in this bucket, even though they have, for the most part, already been able to navigate in the space. But we still wanted to put this here for clarity's sakes, that it now affects all the people you see listed on this page, on this slide. And so again, this is another opportunity where the thought is that this would help increase access for more children to be able to access this, and that schools who are already accredited or have some sort of accrediting oversight are now going to be able to use that accreditation, but then also being able to leverage those On My Way dollars regardless of their PTQ level. And so I think there's a lot to unpack in there, and we will continue to unpack what this bill will look like in real life as we navigate through, as I mentioned earlier, the open enrollment period that's already taking place with On My Way Pre-K, and being strategic about our timing for this as we look upon the recruitment and the application process for the 2024-25 school year that we're going into. So this particular slide is in reference to the changing of the definition of a family childcare home. So we understand and know that currently, until July 1, currently our definition of a family childcare home provider, the number is 6. So you could have less than 6 without being regulated. That has now been changed to having up to 8 without having to be regulated, licensed by our office. So I think it's very important to call out here that this very first bullet is and, right? So these things up here are saying you can have you to have no more than 7, or per this definition means that you have met the definition of a family child care home and need to be licensed if you have at least 8 children. And I do want to call in the fact that we have made concessions here around being able to care for no more than 3 infants. So if you care for more than 4 infants, then if you care for more than 3, I should say, sorry, you then need to be regulated as well. So I think it's very important to know that both of these two in this first bullet here, these are and pieces that all meet the definition, which then require that person to be licensed. The second bullet is a reflecting those kind of more or pieces. So all these things you can't not do. So you does not receive regular compensation, or does not care for children for less than 6 hours a day and no more than 30 hours per week. And so there was an uptick to that hours of care as well before they needed to be regulated. Provides care for fewer than 8 children, not including, again, we're still with the not including those related under the custody or guardianship of the provider or the applicant, if you will, or at least 14 years, and limits the number of children under 12 months. And so I just want to be very clear and call that in to, again, this is the new definition of what a family child care home is and what it requires. If you meet this definition, you must be licensed in our state. And so this takes effect July 1. Now, I will call in the fact that even if you care, it's still like we would today, even if you do care for less than 7 and want to take CCDF, you still have to comply with CCDF regulations. That has not changed and will not change until the federal government makes that change. And so I want to make sure that that's very clear as well. Okay, so this next one is referring to allowing contracted support staff in schools to access childcare at the school. Again, I've teased this one up a few times in some earlier slides, but now we're going to go a little deeper into it. As you see here on this slide, that the change overview says that this allows contracted staff in schools to access childcare at that school. And so what's very important here is to understand that this is actually an additional piece to some language that was added during legislative session last year that allowed the opportunity for schools to offer childcare to their teaching staff at the school. And so this one allows this one extends that a little bit and says that now not only do your teaching staff have access to be able to have childcare at the school, but now if you've got a contract with someone who does like your cleaning there at the school, if you've got a contract with someone who does mental health support at your school, that particular person who's on site with those children providing a benefit at that school is able to access the childcare. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. And again, this is pertaining to those who are, if this school wants to take CCDF and to fund anything, they would still have to go through the proper channels and do all those things. This is, again, another layer to the exemption that was added last year for schools to support them being able to offer childcare supports for their teaching staff. So I just want to make sure that that's clear also. So again, here we talk about the minimum ages for caregivers and licensed centers. I know we've had some questions about why we are specifically calling in centers. And this one is because centers are licensed and this affects them in a way that's different than homes. But licensed homes were already, this does not affect homes at all because they are already able to do this based on their mixed age group environmental settings that we allow in home settings. And as you see here, LLEPs, others can already hire employees at this age. So when you think about your before and after care, your LLEPs, this already was part of what they were already able to do as far as the junior caregiver goes for the school age children. And so as we look at this, again, my eyes and always go directly to like, what's the bang for the buck here? And it's that change overview on each slide, right? And so really we're calling your attention to that 16 and 7-year-olds can now be included in child staff ratios to act as child caregivers, school-age children. Now, to be very clear, that means that they can have their own group, but that school-age or junior caregiver, if you will, can be responsible for their own group, but they're still overarchingly overseen by someone who is at least 18 years of age. They also still have to meet the appropriate CCDF requirements to be a caregiver there on site. Like none of those things went away with the age grouping. Same thing for the 18-year-olds to serve as lead teachers in an infant or toddler classroom. None of the CCDF requirements have changed for them to be able to be in that setting. But what has changed is now the fact that we've changed the age from 21 to 18. And so what I will say that in that legislative language, there is language in there that gives us some room to build in language that requires centers who want to leverage this opportunity to make sure that they are informing that there are pieces that OECOSL can then, or FSSA can effectively ask for them to do on top of what they would normally do for an if they had someone older than 18 or historically 21, if you will, in that classroom setting. And those things could be anywhere from just working with your local family childcare resource and referral agencies, family engagement specialists with some messaging of how are you making sure that families are aware that you have an 18-year-old in an infant classroom? Is there something that they're going to sign? What's your policies and procedures? How are you going to ensure that this 18-year-old is equipped to be able to care for an infant socially and emotionally and all the other gamuts in between there? So those are things that we're still navigating through in the back end while we're working again with our training and technical assistance vendors, our CCR&R folks, our licensing team and legal team, and all the folks around what should this look like as far as next steps to ensure that from a consumer education standpoint, that families are made well aware that their children are being cared for, that their children are being cared for by people under these age groupings. And so I think that's going to be a very critical piece as we move forward. And then again, these changes are to be effective by September 30th of this year because of all the multitudes of the things I've said, including the fact that these are new regulations. So that means there also has to be updates to rules. There also has to be updates to our systems where we go out and do visits with. Checklists have to be updated. Staff need to be trained. Like all the things need to happen before this can safely go into place. And because ultimately we feel like we can do great strides and still be able to offer health and safe environments to children as long as we are prepared to ensure in the meantime as well, not in the meantime, as well, that families are well informed of what they are buying into, whether they take CCDF, whether they're a private pay, that families are well aware, again, from a consumer education standpoint, what their program is offering and the age of the caregivers caring for their children, which is going to be a huge piece. And again, the training and all the things that happen both internally and externally so that everybody is on the same page with this is going to be a big piece that does take some time. So allowing for qualified individuals to serve as ECE substitute teachers. So this one reminds me of the substitute educator pilot that we've teased up a few times here on these town halls, and then even at some of the ELAC meetings we've had over the last year or so in reference to the pilot in Monroe County, that we've seen some great strides happening in that particular space. But even as we were going through that pilot and developing the pieces of it, we realized that substitute educator language is only in maybe one or maybe two regulations. It wasn't across the board. So this ask was to really help us streamline, like, what is the definition of a substitute educator that can be consistently used across all programming types? and consistently used enough that every licensing consultant is aware of what it should look like, what it should be, what are the requirements. Licensing consultants, providers, families, everyone is really clear on what the parameters are around that. So things are being regulated to consistently. Families are aware consistently of who is coming in and out of a program if their child has a substitute, and then that providers have more of some bandwidth to get workforce supports that's consistent across the board. So again, more to come on that, but I know it's one of those things that doesn't really seem like, it just doesn't really seem like it's doing a lot, because really just to some, it may just sound like you're just changing some language. But our hope is that this continues to take us on a pathway of getting us closer and closer to more work in the workforce space to be able to help the ECE workforce. So it makes me excited. I hope it gets you excited to start thinking about the possibilities that this will continue to circle into. So. All right, I know that I said a lot, but I'm gonna pause right now and see if you have any questions or comments, and give you an opportunity to type in the chat any questions. And I think we'll give a moment or two for some questions to be written into the chat, and then Stephen will call in 1 or 2 questions that I can be responsive to here on the town hall. And then if for some reason your question does not get asked this evening, just know that we are collecting all of these questions, and we will be adding them to the FAQ that I shared about earlier. And we will continue to take questions even past today that we will continue to add to the FAQs so that we can ensure that your questions are answered and supported. So I'll pause there and give you a chance to type in the chat and see if there's any questions.
Courtney, I see one question asking about where can providers find income guidelines for CCDF vouchers as they stand right now?
That's great. So one of my friends are going to put that in the chat. One of my OECOSL friends are going to pop that information in the chat to take the person right to the link. And I know it's a really great question too, because we had that one come up a few times in this afternoon's town hall. And I know that the subsidy folks, comms, and myself are working to see how we could add that to the FAQ in a way that's helpful moving forward and easily digestible as well. So great question. So again, there's information coming in the chat, and then more information to be added to the FAQs as well.
Great. And I see that Samantha went ahead and added that link to the chat. Great.
Thank you.
I'm looking through here to see what else we have. Here's a really specific question, and might be in the weeds a little bit, but are public schools eligible to get the child care employee CCDF vouchers if they are not licensed?
No, if they're not licensed or regulated at all. So if they're not an LLEP, so I guess the other thing is did you have to be CCDF eligible for your staff to get access to the CCDF vouchers?
Thank you. And I see one other question about the 16 and 17-year-old rule. Just to clarify, does that only apply to child care centers?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. It only applies to centers because everybody else is pretty much already able to do that.
Great clarification. Thank you. Okay, I don't see a bunch of questions rolling in, so I think we can go ahead and move on, Courtney.
Right, perfect. Thank you. So as we look ahead, so we're gonna switch a little now. And again, if you've got more questions, feel free to type them in the chat. We're gonna grab them all, but we're gonna keep moving for the sake of time. And now I'm gonna transition us a little to talk about our Child Care Management System initiatives. We effectively call it CCMS here at the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. And so you hopefully this won't be the first time you've heard about this, but just in case, I'm excited to bring this in front of you and share about this opportunity. So I will say, again, kudos to the team who's been leading this charge along the way. We were able to see 100 people engaged and applied the very first day the application for this free service was available. So that's a really great win. Providers can apply for the CCMS for up to 2 years with the option to continue without the state's funding. So we funded for 2 years, and then these 3 vendors, Early Learning Ventures, Brightwheel, and Playground, have agreed to give the same reduced pricing that we were able to negotiate to providers for an additional 2 years. And so again, the opportunity here is to really think about how you, as providers, can really start thinking about how you track enrollment, how you track your billing, classroom management records, family communication. I shared on the town hall earlier how I'm still able to go back and still see some of the communication and pictures that my child's provider had for him many years ago for things that I didn't even think to save, but I can still access and see them from previous emails and previous other goodies that I was able to get and capture. And so it's important for many ways, is my point in saying that. And especially as we are looking to do pay by enrollment here in our state, down the road, this is like a step, if you will, in that direction that gets, especially people who haven't typically tracked their enrollment in a system this way, is really going to be exciting to see this preparing them for those next steps. And the fact that we are working for, I say API, but really it means that system will speak to our system and allow that enrollment, once we get to pay by enrollment, to be a key factor in tracking that enrollment for how providers will get paid. And so if you can't tell, I'm pretty excited about this project. We've had a lot of great feedback around it. And again, this is a step in the phase in the process. We also are even helping assist with, for those who need help with technology, to even be able to access using the platforms. And so it really is a great thing to be able to offer this in our state. And I hope you are all as proud as I am that we're offering this and trying to do something to be helpful to childcare providers. And again, as we're looking ahead and what's to come, trying to set providers up to be as successful as possible. So here on this slide, you will see, again, the click-through process of what it takes and means to actually apply within these 6 steps. And again, if you need help with researching the CCMS vendors, we have Spark Learning Lab, our training and technical assistance vendor, funded through this office to be supportive to providers, who is there to help. There's the help desk. You can visit indianaspark.com or email the business support at indianaspark.com in order to get some help. They're at the ready and waiting and excited to be helpful for you as you're thinking through which one of those 3 of the free, a lot of E's there, platforms that are available to you would be best to meet your needs. And they are there to support, and the vendors themselves also have opportunities to be helpful and answer questions even after you've selected them as a vendor. And so we have been very intentional about making sure that those supports were in place. So as we look ahead and we think about the future town hall events, you'll see here under these key topics, things that we are tentatively proposing to be topics on upcoming town halls, with the understanding that we tend to lean into those things that need to be addressed quickly, which is why we spent majority of today's town hall talking about all things bill related, because it is impacting so many pieces of the field. We wanted to set aside this time specifically to really slow down and focus on that. But we also know that there's other topics that are at the ready and top of mind for others, including continued updates on the implementation of these legislative changes. So we will continue to send out messaging through updates through Monday Must Know. We will continue to update the FAQs. So just keeping your eyes on communication that comes out of our office, and that web page that we teased up and shared earlier. And then also, and we will be bringing that back around when we have our next town hall in the next quarter to talk about where we are with the on the status of those implementation pieces. Also, the ECE, Early Childhood Education Regulatory Improvement work. So we are working with the Policy Equity Group, who is helping us do with some regulatory reform recommendations that actually will be shared next Tuesday at the next ELAC meeting, and we'll share some more information about how to access that on the next slide. But we will circle back after that and have some time together to discuss some of those pieces as well. And then also, I know there have another piece that's top of mind are the passive quality updates and where we are with the refresh. Again, the Policy Equity Group recommendations that came out in December, and sharing more about where we are with any of those updates. Again, this is our tentative schedule, subject to change based on need and priority, but that is kind of the lane that we're looking to go down in our next quarter town hall. So I always want to share additional ways to stay engaged. So again, stay tuned, star, love, heart, whatever you need to do on whatever phone, iPad, whatever you're on right now, computer. Make sure you save that Early Child Care and Education Legislative Changes page, because that's going to be where we'll go to make a lot of updates and provide more information to in the months to come as we are implementing, updating our implementation plans and finalizing pieces for those changes. And also, I shared this a little bit about this on the last slide, that the next Early Learning Advisory Council, I think I always say committee, I'm sorry. The Early Learning Advisory Council meeting, ELAC meeting, is on April 30th from 1 to 3. You go to that webpage, it's going to show you the exact location, and that we always share. Courtney Hott, who is the ELAC director, always works with our web team to make sure that the agenda from the past meetings are there. The agenda, any kind of support documents, and the recording live on that page from past meetings. And then if you open up one of the agendas from any month, you'll see the link back to our FSSA YouTube page, which is where these meetings also live stream for access for folks to be able to watch virtually who won't be in the physical space. So just want to tee that up as another way to stay engaged and stay informed and all the things happening in this world of early care and education right now. And then last but certainly not least, leveraging our OECOSL provider inquiry at fssa.in.gov email address, where you're always welcome to send emails there, questions, concerns, thoughts, etc., to that email address, and we do our due diligence to get them answered within 48 to 72 hours. I will say the nice part about emailing that inbox versus my inbox or anybody else's is the fact that multiple eyes look at this inbox. And so you're more likely to get an answer quicker, and probably from the most appropriate person who's actually the subject matter expertise in that area. But all jokes aside, we do divide and conquer responding to the inquiries that come in that inbox. And we make sure that it's covered even when somebody's on vacation, out of office, off-site for the day, et cetera, so that we are as responsive as possible and staying engaged and able to support the needs of the field. So I want to thank you so very much on behalf of the Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning. I have a team of almost 100 folks behind me who are helping lead this charge. I do not do this work alone, and I definitely couldn't do it without the people on this call this evening. So thank you for your engagement and your contributions during today's session. Again, this has been recorded, and a recording will be shared at a later date with you all. And I just want to thank you for your time this evening and hope that you have a great rest of your evening and a great rest of your week. And I look forward to talking to you soon.